everyone. It's Amanda Blain here. Thanks so much for pressing play and joining me for this raw conversation about emotions and stress. So, most people, if we're being very honest with ourselves, will admit that they have felt the same type of stress and very familiar emotions throughout their lives. So, most people have developed a certain way of feeling about themselves and about their place in the world. And we carry this feeling with us into everything we do. We carry it into work, we carry it into our personal relationships, we carry it into our hobbies. And this, a lot of times, what happens is that when this stress is built on top of fear, which most stress is, we tend to bring that fear into our relationships. And then what happens additionally is that because fear is this thing that nobody wants to admit that they have, it's this thing that we've created so much shame around being a human being who has insecurities, or being a human being who is triggered emotionally by things that make them uncomfortable in the outside world, in their environments. There's so much shame around that instead of being totally transparent and admitting to ourselves even that, wow, I'm carrying fear and there's maybe some work that I could do to release my attachment or addiction to this fear. Instead of admitting that, we kind of just stuff it down inside and just go on about our business, hoping that no one will recognize it, hoping that the people that we're in relationship with will not notice how insecure or how much fear we're really carrying. And unfortunately, this causes great limitation. When we are carrying fear into a personal relationship, a lot of the times this fear is embedded within our communication. We may try to control a lot of situations in our lives because of this fear. So let me give you an example so I can bring this more down to earth. Just going to grab a little sip of coffee here. Thanks for joining me. I'm hanging out in Chong An in Vietnam, which is apparently where like the new King Kong movie was filmed. So it's absolutely stunning. I wanted to record this outside so you could have a look at the view, but it was raining a lot this morning. So here we are. So yeah, let's talk about how fear, insecurity, how these things show up in relationship. So if a partner is having a lot of fear of being separated, or maybe they're just feeling very insecure about themselves, maybe they're just feeling like they're constantly comparing themselves to other people, and their mind is using this comparison to tell them how they just aren't as good as other people. And so this narrative is going on in the mind, and this feeling of not being good enough is always on just autopilot. If that's happening within a partner and they are not willing to acknowledge it within themselves and learn how to work through that emotion in order to release it, then what's happening is that they've really kind of become addicted to feeling that emotion. The mind has become addicted to replaying the story that reinforces that emotion. And the body can also be very addicted to this form of stress because most of our insecurities we formed when we were very young. And whenever we feel stress, the body has like trillions of reactions to that stress. And this affects our nervous system, it affects our hormones, it affects so many things in our physiology. And so we can actually have a physical addiction to this emotion as well as a mental addiction. So, what happens is that we get so used to carrying this energy with us that we're just so accustomed to feeling this way that we actually believe that this is our identity. We believe this is who we are. This is how I always feel in the world. And what happens, because we feel like subconsciously we feel like this is just the way it is, and I am helpless to this, and since I cannot change how I feel, my insecurities, since I don't want anyone else to see them, and since I don't want to acknowledge them because that's the scariest thing in the world and how shameful, well, then I'm just going to mask these insecurities and I'm going to do everything I can to control my environment so that I never have to face these fears and insecurities. And so this often shows up in relationships in the form of manipulation and control. Now, do not, please, I caution you, when I use the words manipulation and control, try not to go straight to like this very negative connotation that sort of villainizes anyone who is manipulative or controlling. Being manipulative and controlling is something that I guarantee every human being has done, and every human being has done it because they had some underlying fear that they were unwilling to acknowledge. So let us totally release any judgment we have about those behaviors, and just see if we can cultivate a sense of compassion for this behavior. Because if we're doing that, we're really cultivating some compassion for ourselves. So now let's go a step deeper and maybe just consider how this relates to your life, and use this as a self-seeing exercise. But so the person who is just insecure and is always comparing themselves to other people, well, they're in a partnership. They've been married for many years, and this comparison and this sort of feeling of insecurity and even jealousy has never dissipated. It's always been underlying the relationship. And this person has gone to great lengths to try to control situations. They have wanted to control the people who their spouse is around to make sure that there's no one threatening in that group. There's no one that they feel insecure around in their close friend group or in their company. It may also manifest as partners creating some reason why their spouse or their boyfriend can't go and pursue a passion that they really want to pursue, or they can't go and make a career change that they want to make, because if they do that, the other person will not feel safe and secure. And so instead of these people having an open conversation and saying, wow, I want to honor you and I want you to do the things that you love and be surrounded by the people who expand you, it's really hard for me to allow that because I'm dealing with some deep insecurity within myself. That's a real stretch that someone would actually have that conversation, because we're so ashamed. We always want to look strong and tough. But I promise you that there's nothing stronger than being able to speak what's really on the inside. And what can happen when we speak what's taking place within ourselves, one, it's like a burden is lifted. We no longer have to carry all of this energy inside of us to just stifle, or rather suppress and conceal this insecurity that we have. It takes so much energy to control your environment, to conceal the insecurity inside of you. It takes a ton of energy to do that. So one, if we can acknowledge it within ourselves or acknowledge it with our partner, we have just opened a brand new world up to ourselves. We are free from having to conceal it. And now we can discuss, what are the things that I can do to connect me with my sense of worth so that I am no longer controlled by my fear, And so that I no longer try to control situations and people around me so that I don't have to face that fear. If this shift can happen, if this intention can be set, then the entire world changes for us. Our relationships change, not just personal relationships, but professional relationships, and just the way we interact with the world in general. We may find that there are a lot of things that we have really longed to explore in our lives, but we never have because that insecurity is there, because the fear of feeling jealousy or constantly being stuck in that cycle of comparing ourselves to someone or something in the outside world, that always being there has blocked us from pursuing a passion or a talent or going on a trip we really wanted to go on. So it's not just about healthier relationship with other people, it's about healthier relationship with ourselves. And so that's just one example. There's so many other examples that I can give, and I will do that in future videos. But for the sake of simplicity and keeping these videos to a digestible length, I think I'm just going to share that example today. So there are a couple of things I want to chat about, though. One is that the emotions, the fears and insecurities, these exist, yes, at the level of feeling and sensing, but the subconscious mind plays a huge role in this. So the subconscious mind was mostly programmed by around age 7. And basically what happens is we're born, and then we have the limited experiences that we have in childhood where we're just surrounded by our family and their friends and whomever that we're surrounded by in those early years. And basically we're just kind of watching and observing, and we're feeling and sensing. We get a feeling of our place in the world at that time in our lives. So for instance, say that there is a child who their father has to go away. The family that separates and the father goes away, and the children don't get to see the father on a very regular basis. These children are feeling and sensing that the person I love, my father, who I love very much, he has gone away from me. They're feeling a sense of abandonment. And this feeling of abandonment or aloneness becomes the feeling of themselves in the world. It kind of becomes their identity. And I'm speaking from experience here. So that can become their identity. Another example is that someone is growing up in a home where the parents are just have such high expectations of them. They're just constantly pushing the kids to be involved in this and be the best at this. And the kid is getting a sense of their place in the world. The kid is feeling and sensing that as long as I perform well, then I am lovable. And once again, it's very important here that we suspend our judgments. So not to look at these situations and say, oh, the parents really messed up, separation or divorce is so bad, or it's wrong to push your kids. Just let go of any of those judgments, and let's look at the opportunity available here. So let's take the first child, so growing up with the sense of abandonment. This child grows up and then later is involved in intimate, personal, romantic relationships. And because this sense of the person I love goes away from me, this sense of abandonment has become the subconscious perception, has become the identity for this particular person. They are carrying that energy into all of their relationships. And what will happen is they will inevitably either attract people into their lives who will always go away from them, abandon them, if you want to look at it that way, or they will always be in fear that the people in their lives are going to abandon them. And because they're living in that fear, they may create a lot of chaos, a lot of chaotic communication, a lot of controlling the situation in their relationships. And this may just become too much for someone to be with. And so that person is going to exit the relationship. And here we have our original little child here, who's grown up with the sense of abandonment, is sitting here saying, this always happens to me. Why does this always happen to me? And they don't realize that it always happens because they are projecting their subconscious perception and their feeling of themselves in the world as this abandoned child. They are projecting that everywhere they go. And the world cannot help but respond to those very strong projections. Now, we can examine this in a lot of various ways. We can examine this energetically if we wanted to take a look at the human energy field. We can examine it psychologically if we want to take a look at the subconscious mind and avoidance behaviors and projection. I'm going to reserve that stuff for the online trainings that I'm holding. So that stuff will be broken down in very simple, digestible snippets so that we can really see what are the building blocks, what are the dynamics that create this emotional stress that I keep feeling over and over in my life. And so as we start looking at, okay, these are the building blocks, now I can see what I can begin releasing. So it can be very helpful to see how our psyche works so that we can start releasing the blocks within it. So that example may resonate for some, but not for others. So let's take our other little child who grew up in a home that the parents were just always cheering them on, had high expectations. This is my boy, he's going to do great things. And they have the child involved in every activity. And as long as the child is performing well and practicing really hard, the child gets tons of praise and approval. And so this child grows up feeling like, as long as I perform, I am lovable and I will get praise and my presence is valued. And so they grow up, and because they've been trained to always do what is expected of them in order to get approval, they've kind of lost a lot of their creativity. They haven't explored what really makes them happy, what brings them enthusiasm. Because life back then, when the subconscious mind was being formed, it was never about do what makes you happy, follow your enthusiasm, go play and have fun. It was never about that. It was always about, these are the things that you do, and this is how you need to do them. And then we'll give you our approval. And so this person grows up and they find themselves later in life being in a relationship in which they are the people pleaser. They are constantly doing what the other person wants them to do in order to keep the peace. They are in a job in which they are always the yes man. They're not even enthusiastic about the job, but they do great work because they are so terrified of not gaining the approval of the outside world that they're always going to perform to their best. Now, there's nothing wrong if you find that you're a person who's living that life. I am a person who was once living that life. And so there's nothing wrong with any of this, but it is just an opportunity. If we can look at this and say, wow, that resonates with me. Like, I am being controlled by my fears and insecurities. I am being controlled by a deep need to please other people. What do I like? What lights me up? What am I enthusiastic about? Why don't I say no and sometimes stick up for myself? And why do I sometimes communicate things to my lover that is not really how I feel, but it's just coming from a place of deep fear? And why can't I just get honest enough with myself to quit living out these stress cycles and quit replaying these emotional patterns. And so that's what it really boils down to. In my experience, which is extensive in unraveling the layers of the human condition, it really boils down to getting honest with yourself. No one else can do that for you. No one else, as much as we try to control the world around us or meet the standards of the world around us, none of that is going to change the fact that we are carrying a certain feeling of stress and a certain emotional pattern within us that has become our identities, that we continually project in the world and repeatedly experience the same cycles, the same heartbreaks, the same frustrations, the same fatigue. So it's our responsibility to get honest with ourselves. And once that honesty arises, once we really commit to that, all of a sudden a pathway begins to open. If we really have the intention to dissolve the contents, the stress and emotions that have become our identity, if we really have an intention to do that, the path will open up for us. And that's what I am very inspired to assist folks with, because I've worked so hard to assist myself, and the growing never ends. I continue to constantly have old perceptions fall away, and am always experiencing life in a new way. My partner Dane and I joke about how, the people we were 1 month ago are totally different people than who we are now, because more of those fears and old perceptions are leaving. And it's quite beautiful. It makes for quite an exciting connection, because there is such honesty and such a commitment to taking responsibility for our own baggage rather than projecting that into the relationship. And that's not to say that things don't get messy and that disagreements and misunderstandings don't happen. They do. But the beautiful thing about it is that when that conflict arises, we are able to feel, wow, there's conflict here. First question, what fear am I projecting into this that's creating the conflict? Wow. If I can ask myself that and take responsibility for that, then I've just taken my half of the conflict out. I can see that it is an inner conflict. I can work on resolving it within myself and then present a more balanced energy to the situation. And it's really amazing when two people are doing that. So yeah, just feel very inspired to share what, over 8 years of education and private training and therapy has opened up for me, and just sharing that with people who are really interested in diving into the path of self-honesty and freedom. So if that interests you, I have online training available. You can go to amandablain.me and you can see the online training tab. I've got Change Your Relationship with Fear as one training, and then the next training is Releasing Subconscious Blocks. Now, I am not doing this to just get as many people enrolled as possible and make a bunch of money on this, which is why I haven't just created a link where you can just click and purchase the training. I actually want to make sure that you are committed to discovering some new things about yourself. And I want to see, based on your experiences and some of the training and education you may already have, I want to see if my training is even going to be beneficial for you. So it definitely is some powerful stuff, but I don't want to waste your time and have you enroll in something that is not going to meet you where you're at. So if you want to inquire about training, please email me at amandablainyoga@gmail.com. Let me know that this video resonated with you, and then we'll open a dialogue to see which training would work best for you and what the steps moving would be from there. So once again, Amanda Blain Yoga at gmail.com. The trainings are change your relationship with fear. And then the second training is releasing subconscious blocks. So once again, thanks for pressing play and joining for this conversation. Would love to hear what resonated and why, or what was confusing, so I can clarify in future raw conversations. All right, everyone, I'm going to get out there and bike around this little village, but look forward to connecting with you all very soon. Thanks so much.